Me for our study in the book of Revelation, verse by verse. And again, just like last week, I know you're saying to yourself, Sonny, but that doesn't show the book of Revelation on the screen, and you're right. But I did want to put that up there because, as some of you know who follow me on Facebook and other social media outlets, that I have been posting some Ain't God Cool pictures over the last month or so. Folks send them in, etc. This one actually was taken by my wife. Look at that leaf, fall leaf. It looks like it's falling right from the heavens, doesn't it? It's not. That's plastered to the windshield of my car. She took it I just thought that's such a pretty picture, and I wanted to throw that up there as we introduce our time together with regards to the book of Revelation. And in some ways, in some respects, if you look at it as far as the timeline of humanity is concerned, at least up until the time of the return of Jesus, we're kind of in the fall of the season. We're told that we're in the last days. That's Second Peter chapter 3 and 2 Timothy chapter 3, and we certainly are. And the book of Revelation has a lot to say about the end times events, etc. So I thought that was an apropos picture to put up there. Dirty windshield, all those specks. That's not bugs or anything. That's just a dirty windshield. But isn't that a pretty picture? All right, here we go. The book of Revelation, and we are, I turned my thing off. Book of Revelation, and we are going to look at chapter 5, verses 1 through 5. So yes, we are into a new chapter this evening. And as we study this new chapter, you're going to see a little bit of a transition in topic, not a big one. We're still in the throne room scene, and we're still going to be dealing somewhat with the throne, but we're quickly going to divert our attention away from it into areas that are happening with regards to the opening of the seals and that kind of thing. So anyhow, you'll see it as it plays out, but it's a really good passage. In Revelation chapter 5, beginning at verse 1, then I saw in the right hand of him who was seated on the throne. And probably I should have done this, but I didn't with my screens, and I'm not going to take a lot of time to do it right now, but I want you to review in your mind what we've covered thus far with regards to, hi, Ashley, or that could be Robbie, my buddy Robbie. I never know they use the same account. Whoever it is, thank you. I love you, and I appreciate you for joining me. We're still talking about the throne room scene, and as you review the throne room scene, remember, you've got this awesome scenario where you got God sitting on the throne, and I picture it as crackling, you got thunder and lightning and that kind of thing going on. You got the 24 elders that are all around the throne. You have got the four living creatures. And remember, all of the four living creatures and the elders, they're constantly saying stuff in honor of God. You've got the as it were, a crystal sea out in front of him. And on you can go with the amazing scene, rainbow, etc. A lot of amazing things happening in the throne room of God. Well, as you see that play out in chapter 4, that's chapter 4, see it upside down? That's chapter 4. You'll see the clue for chapter 5 here towards the end. But as you see that play out, keep that in your mind, because remember, in the original language, there were no chapter breaks. And so it's just one continuous flow of information. And so chapter 1 of chapter 5, let me say it. Ready? Verse 1 of chapter 5 is just an extension of the last verse of chapter 4 in the Greek language, just a continuing flow. So as he continues to tell us about the throne room of heaven, we enter into chapter 1, which says, and by the way, not only do we have a throne and 24 elders and four living creatures and all of those kind of things, we also have, by the way, a scroll that's in the right hand of God. Now, a couple significant things about this phraseology here. Number one, notice it's in the right hand of God. Why in the right hand of God? Well, probably because it's indicative of his power hand. And so that's important for us to know. I also would reference what we talked about, I think it was last week, if it wasn't then, in Acts chapter 7, stoning of Stephen. Where does Stephen see Jesus standing? Right hand of God. So if the scroll is in the right hand of God, and Stephen sees Jesus standing at the right hand of God, Jesus is going to be in close proximity then to the scroll, right? We'll notice in the rest of our context here in just a moment that Jesus is the only one that can open the scroll. And so that kind of makes sense, okay? Everything's on the right side, okay? I think you can probably go way too far with this, but I've seen a lot of memes recently about being on the right or the left as far as the political season is concerned. And it is true, generally speaking, if you're going to talk about something that's positive and upstanding and moral, it's going to be on the right, not the left. Remember, the goats, when separated in Matthew chapter 25, they stand on the left. The sheep stand on the right. And on you go. Well, here we got the scroll is in the right hand of God. Jesus is standing on the right hand of God. It's generally a pretty good idea for you to be on the right with regards to policy and that kind of things. But in this situation, again, he's seated on the throne, got the scroll in the right hand, okay? I did all that. Remember, SBS students, here are your questions. I keep standing in the way of them, but here are the questions that we are walking through as we study this particular section. And by the way, let me just brag on the SBS students as you continue to turn in your stuff. God bless you. We've got students in Romania and India and on you go, and they're doing a wonderful job. Especially my good friend in India, he and I are constantly back and forth. He's going to get married, by the way. He and his fiance that had their wedding plans have kind of been upturned a little bit because of this COVID-19 thing. Pray for him, would you? Anyhow, all right, back to our text. Okay, come on, there you go. And as you continue, then I saw in the right hand of the one seated on the throne a scroll written within and on the back. Interesting. And so it's written on both sides, it seems, as far as the scroll is concerned. My dad's real good about doing this. He often talks in his evidences classes about how we got our Bible, and if you'd like to have more information about that, he's got a book that he wrote on that, and Gabriel and I are working to try to get that online, but about how you can know. But he talks about parchment, and as I was doing some study about this particular passage, they were telling me that in the parchment, they would take the parchment and they would lay it in two different directions, and the fibers, or the grain, if you will, would run this way, and the other fibers would be glued this way, and it gave, as they put two sides together, that would give it some sturdiness, as it were. But the thing that's interesting about that is that as you put those two pieces of parchment paper together and glue them there in order to have stability and whatever, but as you glue them together, they would generally take one running this way, one running this way, and that would give it its stability. But notice that the one running this way would have natural fibers, grooves going horizontally. And they say that they generally would write on that side of the scroll because it gave it almost a natural lining, as it were. Okay? They didn't often write on the other side of the scroll, but in this case, they do, it seems, write on both sides of the scroll. Is that to indicate to us the importance of the message? Is it supposed to indicate to us a shortage of parchment in heaven? Obviously not. But whatever the information that we're getting here, possibly with regards to, again, remember he's taking a heavenly concept, putting it into a human mind, it might be the urgency of the message. It's so important. We're going to write on both sides. It's so important. I want you to get the whole message. That might be part of it, okay? But I wanted you to notice this in Exodus chapter 32. Then Moses turned and he went down from the mountain with the two tablets. We know where we're at, 10 Commandments. The two tablets of testimony in his hand, tablets that were written on both sides, on the front and on the back. So did you know the 10 Commandments, as they come down the mountain, that they're actually written on both sides? How about that? That's interesting, isn't it? Here is our clue to remember for chapter 6. Now, again, we're not into 6, we're in 5. And like I say, you'll see the clue as we get down there. But this is coming from the book that Gabriel and I are writing called Revelation Realization. And in it, we have a bunch of clues helping young people and others who are studying it to remember the topics of each chapter. Well, here's chapter 6. It's supposed to look like a scroll. I thought he did a phenomenal job. But here you'll notice we've got all of these seals. There are 7 seals that we're going to have and we're going to talk about with regards to this scroll. All right, we covered that enough. The scroll, and it's written on both front and the back. Next thing I wanted to notice in our context is that it is sealed with 7 seals, as I just mentioned. So there are 7 seals. What's the purpose of a seal? Well, it keeps access from those who don't need to be reading it. It also would govern the time at which it would be read. On and on you can go with it. It has security, and that kind of thing that is associated with it. Well, in this particular case, we're going to find that the Lamb is the only one worthy in all of creation, the only one worthy to actually open the seals. There are 7 of them, as I've already mentioned. There are 4 things that are part of or descriptive of the deliverance of God's wrath or judgment upon the world, and all 4 of them have 7 within the book of Revelation. And there's other 7s there as well, but 4 things. The first is 7 seals. The second is 7 trumpets. Then you're going to find that there's a third one, the 7 bowls of wrath. When we get to chapter, 16, I believe, we'll begin to see the 7 bowls of wrath. But there's a fourth one that most folks don't know about or talk much about, and there's a good reason for that. But the fourth seven is the seven thunders. We don't know much about it because God basically tells John, he gets started, and as I guess the first thunder is thundering or whatever, he gets started in the writing process. God said, no, seal that up. We're not going to talk about that. And so we don't have any information about the seven thunders. Why it's even brought up, I don't have a clue. But there seems to be four different sevens referencing God pouring out his wrath upon the planet. That means, if seven means completeness, that you have got essentially 28 of these things that are coming down as plagues, judgments, etc. And by the way, they're not all, even in the seven seals that we're going to see here in a moment, they're not all, I was going to say they're not all negative. I guess they are pretty much negative, but they're not all dealing with a torturous discipline that comes upon. Well, let me just show you what I mean. Here are the seven seals. We'll see them in chapter 6 when we get there. We'll begin the process. You get 6 seals that are open in chapter 6, and then you have to wait to chapter 8 to get number 7 open. But here they are. The first seal is a white horse. He sees a white horse that represents conquering, and it says that right in the text. A red horse, and the red horse removes peace from the earth. They begin to fight with each other. A black horse, you'll see with the black horse, scales, food shortages that are taking place. Then number 4, the fourth seal, as it opens, it shows a pale horse, which represents death and Hades. The fifth one, here's where I'm getting to that, where it's not always a torturous thing necessarily, but it's a reference to something else. In the fifth seal, we're going to see the souls under the altar who are crying out to God, how long, how long? Okay, so it's not like a plague has necessarily been released in the fifth seal, as much as it is you just have all of these folks crying out, why is it not, your time frame not up, God? Why do you allow this to continue to happen? In the sixth seal, we have earthquakes, sun goes dark, moon turns to blood, stars fall from the sky. Sky is actually rolled up like a scroll. That's going to be some kind of impressive something to see. I actually want to be on God's side of the realm whenever that happens. And number 7, half an hour of silence in heaven. Then there's a censer that is filled with fire from the altar and thrown to the earth. And when it's thrown to the earth, there's thunder, lightning, earthquakes. Now, many folks believe that those 7 things were fulfilled during the time of Rome. I do not. I believe that they probably have some kind of an association with things that did happen when Rome conquered Israel. Conquered Jerusalem. I don't have any problem with that, but I do not believe that they represent the entirety of the macrocosm or the macro fulfillment of the prophecies that are happening here. And one of the reasons is because we're not going to take time right now because we're going to walk through each of those 7 as we enter into chapter 6. But one of the reasons is because a lot of them just simply do not have a historical marker that we can look to and we can say, well, sure, I remember when the moon turned to blood or the skies rolled up like a scroll or we had stars falling out of the heavens, etc. Now, there are some folks who will speak to some natural occurrences, but in this context, it seems that these are things that are very, very obvious to the world. These are things that are an obvious discipline from God, not just some kind of an obscure moment in stargazing or whatever. These things are obvious to the world, it seems to me. That's why I don't believe that they were fulfilled in finality back during the time when Jerusalem fell to Rome. All right, so there's your 7 seals as is referenced in chapter 5 and verse 1. Okay. Now again, you're not going to see any of that in chapter 5 because we're not opening in chapter 5. In chapter 5, it's just about the seal and the fact that there is someone who is worthy to open it up. But as we get into chapter 6, we'll begin to enumerate all of these, so you're bound to see that blue square again. And I saw a mighty angel proclaiming with a loud voice, "Who is worthy to open the scroll and break its seals?" And no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or look into it. No one is worthy. No one is worthy. In this verse, it actually says no one is able. But you'll see in the context, it's actually the reason they're not able is because they are not worthy. Now, I don't want to run too quickly ahead of myself, but I will just so that you get the whole picture. The reason no one is able is because no one has conquered except for the Lamb. The conquering is the key. The conquering is what makes the Lamb worthy. That's why you're going to see in chapter 5 here in just a moment that the Lamb that is able to open the scroll is the Lamb that is slain, referencing Jesus, okay? So no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth was able This under the earth phraseology comes up several times in Scripture. It's interesting phraseology. I'm not sure I can explain it in its entirety because I'm not sure I understand it completely. But heaven clearly seems to reference that which is the realm of God. Okay, it's outside the context of the human realm. Okay, then you got earth. That, of course, is our realm, the human realm. And then you've got that which is under the earth. You notice that we got heaven on top. Then you got earth. Then you got under the earth. A lot of folks believe, and I happen to be one of them, that when he references that which is under the earth, he's talking about that which is evil. A context that is probably the realm, if you will, of the demons, Satan, etc., under the earth. But the point is, nobody can open it. If Satan himself had been present at this point in the throne room of God, he could not have opened that. And Satan is a powerful being. No one, the 24 elders cannot open it. The 4 living creatures cannot open it. It cannot be opened except by one being. And we'll see that in just a moment. So no one in heaven or earth was able to open or to look into it. That was my memory verse, by the way, this morning. Our little home church on the first Sunday of every month, we have Memory Verse Sunday. And everybody goes around, and what we do is we quote our memory verse, and then people have to guess where it's at in the Bible. It's kind of a fun one. That was mine. And they guessed it immediately because we're studying the book of Revelation, so they already knew it. All right, verse 4. And I, that is John, I began to weep loudly because no one was found worthy to open the scroll or to look into it. He began to weep loudly. John has been on quite a ride, if you think about it. In chapter 1, we know that he's in the Spirit, and it's on the Lord's Day. And this is when the journey begins. Jesus shows up in this revelation moment, and Jesus is walking among the candlesticks, and he talks about the lampstands, and he's talking to John, and he's giving him the assignment, I want you to write to these churches, because each of the lampstands represents a church. Chapter 2, John begins that particular process. But as it continues to unfold, chapters 2 and chapters 3 are kind of, reasonable. We can get that with our little minds because he's addressing it somewhat in a human standpoint. So we get all the 7 churches of Asia. But then we go into chapter 4, and it one more time says that he was in the Spirit, and he was transported into the throne room of heaven. And what we've been studying with regards to chapter 4 is just like mind-blowing, right? Well, John's on that roller coaster ride, okay? In the midst of all of that roller coaster ride, he's just completed this amazing, overwhelming scene of who God is and his realm and heaven and all of those kind of things. Well, in the midst of that, he notices this scroll. A scroll to John would mean information. And John's on this journey of information. But there are 7 seals, not a seal, 7 seals on this scroll. And he recognizes, not just probably because of the 7 seals, but also because of what the mighty angel is going to say, no one's worthy. No one can open this thing. And this really hurts the heart of John. And he's just overwhelmed by it. And it says that he begins to weep loudly. Now, again, I can't give you all of the information because I don't know, but it seems to me that what's happening is John is weeping because he wants to know. He's concerned that the story is over, that we're done. All of the information is sealed, and almost like Daniel or Ezekiel or whatever, that, we're just going to have to wait for centuries and centuries before we ever get more information. And so he's really upset about this. Second thing that I would suggest probably is indicated by this phrase that I've got underlined is that the timing is interesting in that it seems that John, at this point, even though he's in the presence of God, he's seen all the marvelous things that he's seen, etc., he just simply is at a loss because he feels like that the timing, as you see it, is that he doesn't really expect to get any answers. The third thing, which was brought up by Emily in in our home church this morning, I thought was an awesome reference or awesome idea with regards to this phrase, is that it's possible that John recognized that he was among the unworthy. And maybe what's happening here is he's actually, because of the statement of the mighty angel, he's actually recognizing that he himself can't even open this scroll. And maybe he's just humiliated by who he is, where he is at the time, etc. Whatever it is, he's weeping loudly because he doesn't evidently expect to get any answers. Okay? However, one of the elders is going to step up and is going to say to him, weep no more, etc. You're going to get your answers, okay? but it's one of the elders. I asked this question in my home church this morning, and every once in a while I got to step over here so that the SBS students can keep up with their questions. But why or who is this elder? Which one of the elders is it? Now, obviously, the passage just doesn't tell us which one of the elders it is. But if the elders, there's 24 of them, if the elders are representing the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 apostles, so Israel and the church, if that's what's happening here, then you could narrow it down maybe a little bit, and you could ask yourself, okay, so is this elder from the 12 representing Israel? I mean, that would make sense given what we're going to see here in a moment, this whole idea that Jesus is the Lion of the tribe of Judah, he's the root of David. But on the other hand, is this elder from the 12 that represent the church? That would make sense as well, because that's what he's dealing with regards to the present tense, as far as what the world's is experiencing or going to experience with regards to the wrath of God's being done. I don't know. So you're saying, why bring it up? Well, because remember, there's a lot about the book of Revelation as we travel through this that we're not going to know. And at the end of the day, we're going to end and we're going to say, boy, I almost have more questions than I have answers. Yeah, that's right. And by the way, you're in good company, because that's the way it has been with scholars all the way through history since almost the time that it was written. But don't give up on it, because remember what chapter 1 tells us. If we will read, hear, and apply, there will be a blessing that comes to us. So the point of the book of Revelation is not necessarily that we figure it all out. The point of the book of Revelation is that we are in the midst of the journey of finding the revelation ourselves. It's the journey that seems to be the important idea here. So don't stop journeying, okay? So one of the elders, remember there's 24 of them, they're seated around. One of the elders is going to say, hey, hold on just a second. My buddy Briley this morning, he made a point. He said, I asked that question, so which one of the elders is it? He said, well, it evidently is one of the elders who isn't at the present time casting his throne before his crown before the throne. So I don't know if they all took turns, kind of. You remember in our last chapter, we got 24 elders, and they're constantly casting their crown before the throne of God. And evidently, this is one of them that isn't doing that at the moment, because he's talking to John. I thought that was kind of cute. All right, and again, as we know, the timing of God in his realm is nothing like the timing that we have, etc. But as you try to put it in our little pea brain, maybe Briley is right. All right. Then the last phrase that we want to see, and it's a very, very important one, so we'll pause here for just a moment or two. The elder, whoever he is going to say to John, weep no more. Just suck it up, son. You don't need it. Don't be crying. Behold, the lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has conquered, so that he can open the scroll and its 7 seals. You don't need to weep over this kind of thing, because we do have somebody who is worthy. In all of the created realm, there is no one that is worthy, but there is someone who is worthy. This is the clue that comes from the little book that Gabriel and I are writing together. This is the clue for chapter 5. And you'll notice that you got the blood as it's dripping across the scroll and down here, because this is the slain lamb. As you come back to this then, John's crying, the elder steps up, don't be doing that, because we do have someone worthy, and it is the lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David. 2 things. The first is the lion. Here is the actual prophecy about Judah himself back in the Old Testament. Judah is a lion's cub. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He stooped down, he crouched as a lion, and as a lioness, who dares rouse him. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until tribute comes to him. And so, where does Jesus come from? My grandson, I was so thankful that they did this, but my first and only, was when they were being named, Bryson and Victoria were, whatever, what should we name him, etc. And they wanted to give him a biblical name, etc. And so they opted for Judah Levi. Now, think about that. Judah is the kingly tribe through which we're going to get Jesus, and Levi is the priestly tribe. So they got kind of a double whammy there. And by the way, you and I are that. We are a royal priesthood. We've got a double whammy going in our life as well. But back to Judah. So Judah, the Judah of Genesis, he is going to be a forerunner, as it were, to Jesus. Okay? And it says here that Jesus is actually the lion. He is the Judah. He is the lion of the tribe of Judah. Now, what do you think of when you think of a lion? Obviously ferocious. You say someone that can defend. What do they call a bunch of lions? They're in
Right.
pride. Yeah, the pride. Thank you, Dad. And so that's what we have here. We've got a lion who is more than capable of taking care of business. But notice that in this context, we also are going to refer to him as a lamb as we continue in our context. It's an odd. You got a lamb and a lion, and the two are combined there as descriptions of Jesus, meaning that Jesus. There are moments in Jesus' life when he simply his self-discipline. He withheld the power that he has, and that he allowed them to put him on the cross. Okay, they didn't take his life from him. He laid down his life on behalf of us. All right. And yet there are other times, and we're going to see that now as we're going to begin to open these seven seals, we're going to see some ferocity. Is that the word? He is a ferocious individual when it comes to defending and exerting justice on behalf of those who have been slain on his behalf. Yeah, okay. So anyhow, it's the slain Lamb of God, but don't let that lead you into some kind of sissy speak. That's not Jesus. Jesus is the slain Lamb of God because he allows them to slay him. Okay? He is the Lion of Judah. He is also the root of David. What's the word root? Well, remember, Jesus is going to come through the lineage of David, but he actually existed before David, right? And so Jesus is actually the reason there even was a David, even though Jesus will be born many years after David. Complicated? Not necessarily if you understand that he's an eternal being, but Jesus is going to come into the fleshly world through the womb of Mary as we know it, but that's going to be many years after David sits on his physical throne. So, I guess you could say in some respects, Jesus is the great whatever grandson of David. Okay? But at the same time, you've got him existing prior to it, because Jesus is the one, John 1, Jesus is the one who actually is the dynamic of creation, keeps creation together, and so he's on both sides. I think you get that. So he is the root of David. All that's trying to really emphasize here is this, wow. Jesus is ferocious, and he is the root, he is the source, but he is also willing to lay down his life because he loves you that much. Pretty awesome. All right, come back here, one last thing. Notice that he is also the conqueror. This is the reason that he is worthy. I'm not making anything up. That's what it says. We've no more. He's the root. He's also has conquered. Behold, he's conquered so that he can open the scroll of the seven seals. So the reason he can open it is because he's the conqueror. He did it. He's the only one in all of history that solved the impossible equation, which was all you got to do is sin one time, and your imperfection keeps you out of the presence of God. It just takes one sin. And all of us have sinned a lot more than that, but just one. And so it's the impossible equation. In fact, Satan was banking on the impossible equation, but it's going to blow up in his face eventually, that it could not be solved. When Jesus came, I don't think Satan even had an inkling of an idea that God would go so far as to die for some of us weaklings down here. He would go so far as to take part of himself and hang on the cross so that these little weaklings, these little peons down here could be saved. I don't think Satan really expected that. I think it blew him away, as it should blow you and I away as far as the love of God is concerned. The reason that Jesus is worthy to open the seven seals is because he's a conqueror. But remember, the seven seals are not good news. Jesus is the author, the perfecter. He is the one who completes our gospel, our faith. He is the one who brings about the good news. But in this situation, you've got to recognize that the six seals are all about the discipline that he is going to put down upon the planet. In fact, as you travel through all four of those, again, we don't have a lot of information about the four thunders, but as you travel through the four seals, the four trumpets, and the seven seals, the seven trumpets, and the seven bowls of wrath, you're going to notice that, especially in the bowls of wrath, that there's this constant reference to the fact that he did this, but they would not repent. He did that, but they would not repent. On and on you go. It seems that all these sevens that are presented are for the purpose of drawing us back to God, and yet it doesn't seem to happen for the majority of folks. Jesus is the conqueror, and so lest you take this image and turn it into what so many of my just be happy preachers are doing today. Understand that he's the conqueror, and as we travel through most of the rest of the book of Revelation, you're going to see a side to Jesus that is not the warm and fuzzy, bring me the children and let me kiss on them. He is going to be a Jesus that administers the wrath of God. And so you and I need to recognize that if we want to survive, we have got to be part of the remnant. We've got to be in Christ Jesus, because Colossians chapter 2 will tell us that the fullness of the deity reigns within Jesus. And then it goes on to say in Colossians chapter 2 that those of us who've been baptized, circumcised by the hands of Jesus, we reign with Christ within Jesus. We have the fullness of the deity. The only way you're going to survive the troubles that are to come with regards to the sevens that we're talking about here is if you are in Christ. It's the only possible way for you to have survival. And so, because he's the conqueror, he then is worthy to open the scroll, and in so doing, we will see one by one the seals are broken and various things transpire. That is Revelation chapter 5. Let's see if I can take... Yeah, so I want to get the SBS students one last time if you wanted to see that. That is Revelation chapter 5. And as we see it unfold before us, we see the introduction into the discussion then of what follows. And honestly, until you get the last two chapters of the book of Revelation, this is kind of the thread. This is because we're going to travel through the sevens that I've been talking about. And these are seven parts of the revelation of God's wrath upon the planet. And so this is going to be our mode for most of the rest of the book of Revelation. All right. I love you. I appreciate you. Thank you for joining me. If you're an SBS student, here are the questions, and I pray that you have gotten them all answered as I've been talking. Our next live event will be tomorrow at noon. Cindy, Gabriel, and I will be in the SUV, and I'll tell a few jokes, and they'll sing a serious song. And you'll enjoy it because it's always a good time. And then tomorrow night at 8 o'clock, last day's live, we need to talk a little bit about our president and the first lady and others with coronavirus and where we're going as far as the election, etc. So please join me at 8 o'clock tomorrow night. Until then, please know that I appreciate you so very, very much. Oh, one last thing I wanted to share with you. I can get that thing. Come on. There. No. Boom, boom, boom. Come on. Give it here. There it is. Boom. I want to share with you this. We are sending out, in fact, they're right back there in a box. Mom has folded, stuffed, and licked. You didn't lick them, did you, Mom?
No.
No licking. She just sealed them with a sponge or something. But the next issue of the Prophecy Papers is going out, and I think it's chapter 3 of the book of Revelation from our book that is going out. If you're not receiving them, it's because I don't have your physical address. All you got to do is message me with your physical address, and I'll get you in the list. In fact, I think I have enough left that I can make sure that you get one from this round. So let me know, okay? Sonny Childs, be there. Matthew 16:26.
Wow.